Thanks for tuning in to Written on the Edge, Season 8, Episode 3. In this week's episode, we'll be discussing a memoir with author Patricia Grayhall. Then we'll be continuing our review of Sense8 with guest reviewer Albert Nothlit. And so we've broken this episode into chapters so you can jump to your favorite part. Now, onto the review. Now, onto the interview. Patricia Grayhall is a retired medical doctor and author of Making the Rounds, Defying Norms in Love and Medicine, that garnered a starred review in Kirkus Reviews, as well as positive reviews from Katherine Forrest and Radclyffe. She's published articles in Queer 40, the Gay and Lesbian Review, The Millions, Lesbian Game Changers, the Seattle Lesbian, and Seattle Magazine. In addition to a recent NPR interview, her book is among Kirkus Reviews' best indie books of 2022. Patricia lives with the love of her life on an island in the Pacific Northwest where she enjoys other people's dogs, big nature, and her second career as an author. Patricia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So we're about to dive into the amazing life you've led, but I want to start by asking, where did you get the urge to write it all down? Where did that creativity come from?
I guess that the first urge occurred in my 20s when I was actually living my life. And even though I was going through medical training, I didn't write very much about that. I wrote mostly about my struggles with my interpersonal relationships, trying to figure out what I wanted in a relationship. And I did a lot of that on the page. And then, of course, I put them away in a box and didn't look at them for 40 years. Wow. And then I was downsizing. My partner and I were moving into a condo from a large house, and I came across the box again. This was in the spring of 2019.
Okay.
And we had this big fire going in the burn barrel, and I thought I'd just toss them in there and get it over with. But I thought I'd better look at them first. And when I did, I I looked back through that whole period, which was when I came out as a lesbian and as a woman trained to become a doctor when it was pretty much an all-male profession, and also came of age in an essentially homophobic nation. And I realized that my story had relevance beyond the personal, especially now.
100% now.
Because, yeah, I mean, I think many young people today don't realize what it was like before Title IX, when women were really denied equal access to education. And before Roe, even though we're back there again,
yeah,
in many states.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that it was a story that needed to be told. Women who love women have been marginalized for so long, and historically we've hidden our lives and burned our letters, and especially during the period when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s. And yet we have managed to thrive and really live amazing lives, many of us. And so why should we not tell our stories in the full complexity, and let people know what our lives are like?
Mm-hmm.
And I know some of my lesbian sisters cringe a little bit at the honesty of my memoir, and because I guess as people have been marginalized for so long, we want to put our best foot forward for the world, especially if we have straight people reading our book, right?
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's also because of a lifetime of hiding who you've been?
Yes,
that they're reacting like that, I mean?
Yes, and I'm old enough that I grew up in the 50s and 60s. And during that time, well, when I thought I might be a lesbian at age 15, I went to the library the only books I could find. I mean, there was none of that lesbian pulp fiction that was out at the time.
Mhm.
Wish I had gotten a hold of that.
Right.
That would have made a world of difference.
Yeah.
But what I read, were these academic books saying that lesbians were damaged people who led tortured lives and couldn't hold down jobs or sustain relationships. And it was classified as a mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
So that wasn't very encouraging for me as a 15-year-old. And unfortunately, I spent several years trying to be straight, which is the first part of the book, and had some unsavory experiences as a result, to say the least.
Right. Can we talk about some of them? I know they're pretty personal.
Well, I did. I was a teenager, and I had a boyfriend, and I was 17, and he was really, in many ways, a nice guy. He was smart and handsome, and his name was Ernesto, and I thought he was beautiful with his, brown skin and very handsome and tall and all of that. And so we went together for a while, but we didn't have sex. And then when we went out to Los Angeles to visit his family, he had a large family, and I was to share a room with his sister. And I just realized after spending a week there that I was more attracted to his sister.
You're like, whoa, wait a minute.
I'll take her. Which led to some conflict with him and the end of that relationship.
Well, it's interesting too, because you say that it's great for the children that we have now out there who are living their best lives built upon the things that we went through, because I'm the generation right after you, and the way that we grew up and had to find our way pretty much on our own. We didn't have the internet or anything. I mean, the card catalog is probably, or the magazine rack was probably the closest, that we could come to that. And I think it is relevant for we older cats in the neighborhood to spread our stories and to tell them, because we're under threat. That, I mean, let's be clear, the Republicans and the conservatives are doing their level best to take us back there. They're using words and phrases we've not heard since that period,
Absolutely. And this friend of mine told me just recently that she has this large collection of lesbian pulp fiction. And I didn't come across this when I was growing up. But all of these stories, well, most of them, with the exception being The Price of Salt, which has a happy ending, but they all have, at the end of the book, the lesbian dies, a tree falls on her, she's realizes her error and returns to men, or she checks into a mental institution. It's just,
well, it was the same way in movies too.
Well, and the movies were like that too. I mean, the Fox and they were just awful. If you were a young person growing up, I mean, my friend, who's slightly younger than I am, said that these books nevertheless gave her hope, because 99% of it until the last 3 pages was pretty hot,
Well, and it's like Harvey Firestein said, it was better to have some representation than none at all,
But I mean, the good news now is look at the media now, and all the there's lots of positive representation of queer people. And we're up here in Canada part-time, and with a large group of straight people that we live with, and we show queer movies. our straight friends,
Mm-hmm.
and they all seem to not bat an eye, So
Good. That's good to hear. So, can I ask, during your medical training, were you out?
I was, well, again, I went to medical school in Salt Lake City, and
Oh, wow.
even though it was in the 70s, it was in the early 70s. If I'd gone to school in San Francisco or Boston or LA, it might have been different, but I was not generally out in Salt Lake City.
Understandable.
And in fact, I was only one of 5 women in a class of 100, mostly Mormon men. 90% of the class was Mormon. And I formed a friendship with a man, a fellow student in my class, who I thought was gay. I picked him out as gay. It's not like he swished around or any, had any character, stereotypic behaviors, but he just, I don't know, it's, our gaydar, right?
Gaydar, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we survived.
That's how we survived. So I approached him. I was not getting along with my female roommate. First of all, she figured out that I was gay and was making snide remarks in front of the other students. And second of all, we just didn't click. And so I asked David if he'd like to be my roommate, which freaked him out. He thought I was coming on to him or something. But I told him strictly as friends, and so we moved in together, and it was actually saved both of our lives, because he was gay, although he didn't come out till his senior year. But that platonic relationship supported both of us through those years, and I was able to, of course, come out to him. So there was at least one person sharing my life that knew I was a lesbian.
And also knew what you would potentially go through. So,
Right. Yeah. And he came from a very conservative Wyoming family, even though he'd gone to Harvard. And, so it was difficult for him to come to terms with his sexuality as well. And he claims, that I am responsible for it, but because I sort of encouraged him, and I set him up on a blind date. And
Awesome. Well,
anyway, he's happily married and living in Florida, and we're still friends.
Oh, yay. Good to hear that.
Yeah, he was my best person at my wedding.
Yeah.
So what he's doing is he's accusing you of making him happy. That's probably something that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. They've been together for decades and have a very good life.
Awesome.
So
excellent.
I guess I should, I'm happy that he's happy.
All right. So, professional career, any challenges you want to highlight from the memoir?
What area of medicine?
Well, it evolved. In medical school, which I have to say, it wasn't all bad. I did have some bad experiences as a woman. The misogyny was still pretty rampant, and especially in surgery. And interestingly,
and in Utah,
and also in obstetrics. I ended up at Latter-day Saints Hospital for my obstetrics rotation, and there were no women. There were no women on physicians at all, and so no role models. And then in the birthing room, my sole job was to catch the placenta. And they wouldn't let me do anything, position the baby.
Wow.
So the episiotomy, nothing. I learned nothing. So after 3 days of this, which was 24 on, 24 off, I just said, I'm not learning anything here. And I left. And the head of GYN at the University Hospital took pity on me and took me under his wing, and I did the rest of the rotation at GYN. And there I had the opportunity to counsel a Mormon woman who had 5 kids, who came in pregnant with her 6th in her 40s and just said she just couldn't take it anymore. She just couldn't go through it. And she hadn't told her husband. And this was just about the time that Roe was decided. But of course, things didn't happen quickly in Salt Lake City. So,
right.
Dr. G, who was head of GYN at the time, told her he would do a hysterectomy for fibroids, knowing she was 8 weeks pregnant. So I got to assist on that. But more importantly, I sat with her before the procedure, talked to her about how it was her body, her right to decide, not her husband's.
Yep.
I had also undergone an illegal abortion prior to Roe in somebody's bedroom in Nogales, Mexico.
Oh.
And I had mixed feelings about it too, but being pregnant would have ruined my life. And so, we had this discussion, and then afterwards, she still felt ambivalent. But a few weeks later, when I was walking to class, I was on cardiology at that point, and the administrator stopped me in the hall and said, "Someone left something for you." And I went in to the office, and on her desk was about a foot-high papier-mâché doll of a woman carrying a black bag and a white coat with the lettering saying, Patricia Grayhall, MD.
Oh,
that's really cool.
So that was her thanks. And so there were these, episodes of bonding with patients, and the fact that I was a woman, made a difference to their care and their experience. And I have to say, though, that despite surgery, despite OBGYN, I loved a medical school, even in Salt Lake City. I mean, there was a tribe of us, about 10 of us non-Mormons. We lived in the medical towers, just, a few hundred yards from the medical school. And we often prepared meals together and studied together. And so it was, once David and I found each other and our tribe, it was a really pleasant experience.
That's very cool. Anything else you want folks to know about the memoir?
I guess one of the things I want to say about it is that it's a coming-of-age memoir. So I stayed in character with my youthful self rather than popping out and,
being the sage adult,
being the wise narrator saying, what are you doing?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, my older self would have scolded me, my younger self, for crossing boundaries, squandering love, and making mistakes. And but I think it's important to really connect with readers, to portray that in a visceral way without popping out, into the present with meaning. I think, memoir is supposed to convey insight and meaning. But I decided to wait until my epiphany, which happened, toward the end of the 70s, when I decided that the way I had been doing my relationships was not good for me. So, So some people have been critical of that.
Hmm.
And also some who think this is just going to be a story of, a woman goes through a hard time in an all-male profession and succeeds. That's there for sure, but it's largely about the difficulty of sustaining and maintaining relationships. I think in the 70s, it was during the second wave feminism and the sexual revolution. And while my experience in Boston taught me that desire was something to be celebrated, there weren't role models of how to sustain relationship beyond desire. And that was something, that I was influenced by.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you're writing, as I was in my journals at the time, life seems to be a series of chaotic events, but it's only when I started writing the memoir that I could see the patterns and how the culture and my family upbringing influenced my behavior and my choices.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that young people will be able to relate to my experience and feel less alone if they're struggling with some similar issues, learn from my mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And as Brene Brown said, someday you'll tell the story of what you went through and it'll be someone else's survival guide, which I hope for my book. And then for older queer people, I hope that they see some of themselves in my book and my experience and feel validated and see.
Yeah, the structure you just mentioned, where you're writing as the young you experiencing these things for the first time, is extremely powerful, and that's how life goes. So the fact that you wrapped it up at the end with the wisdom, again, that's how life works. We look back and see all of our signposts of, oh, I should have turned left instead of right. Oops.
Right.
No, I think that's a brilliant way to write a memoir. So yeah, let's get it into people's hands and help them find their part of the story.
Right.
So what's up next for you? What should people be watching for? Are you going to be doing any book tours with the memoir, or are you writing another one?
Yes, I have several things still coming up. I have two events, one in Bellingham, Washington next weekend, which is at Ponderosa Books and Beer.
Cool.
I'm going to be doing a reading and having a discussion. And then the following week on February 1st at the Skyway Library, which is one of the King County libraries in Seattle, I'll be also doing a reading and an event that evening, Wednesday evening, from 6:30 to 8. And I also have I'll be part of a panel at the Tucson Festival of Books in early March.
Nice.
Lovely.
And also part of a panel at the Saints and Sinners
Oh, cool.
writing
Very
conference
cool.
in New Orleans at the end of March.
Very, very cool.
And I have a couple of interviews, like this in between. So it's still going on, which is nice.
That's fantastic. So what social media or website is best for people to follow these updates so they know where to find you?
I'm most active on my Facebook author page, Patricia Grayhall Author, and also on Instagram, which is also Patricia Grayhall Author. So those are the two sites. And I usually post at least 3 times a week.
Nice.
Things related to my book. And also just some, life behind the scenes stuff.
I was just thinking, yeah, as a bug in your ear, Maybe you ought to think of writing a fictionalized version of your story, but do the path not taken and see where it goes. That
Right.
might be very interesting to see, especially in that time frame. What if you had gone left instead of right? What would have
Yes.
happened? Kind of thing.
I did write a novel with my partner.
Uh-huh.
She was getting quite fed up with my writing my memoir with my head in the past and all my past girlfriends. She was really not happy with that. And so I suggested that we write a novel together. So we did. We started in during NaNoWriMo in
Okay. Uh-huh.
2020. And we wrote something very quickly, and it wasn't that good, but just recently we've revived it and revised it. And it's sitting with the publisher right now. It's with Wild Rose Press, but they are taking so long that I am almost ready to self-publish it because I've already come up with a cover.
Ooh.
And, we really self-publishing, I've been told, I haven't done it, but I've been told it's really quite easy. And so we may well go that route.
Go that route. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very nice. Do you have any final words of wisdom for people?
Just that I hope that other queer people will write their stories. I think we need to be.
Why don't you show people the cover of your book?
Yeah.
Oh, I will. Yes.
Yay!
Yes, and this is
Lovely cover.
This is me in my 20s.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had a lot more hair.
Didn't we all?
You've got the original picture on your Instagram, right? Because I thought I saw it out there.
Anyway.
All right.
Yes, so it's available in audio book as well as print and ebook. And the audiobook narrator is really good. I was so pleased with Alex Picard.
Nice.
So.
All right. And your final words of wisdom were people... I'm sorry, we kind of interrupted.
Words of wisdom. Just that I hope that other queer people will write their stories and just write them. I mean, don't worry about who's going to see them or what you're going to do with it. Just write down your experiences. And I hope people will write their full experience, not just their professional lives or their...
the polished version of their life.
But yes, the polished version that you put on social media, but rather the full Monty of their experience. And and then later you can revise and you can decide what to do with it. Or, but I think it's really important that we become part of a more complete history of humanity.
Agreed.
Yeah,
completely.
absolutely. That's why we do what we do.
Yep.
Right. And thank you for that.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
All right, folks, pick up Making the Rounds by Patricia Grayhall. Enjoy the memoir because she shows you the ugly tears as well as the happy laughs, so you're not going to find a better memoir. We at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators, so like, subscribe, hit all the buttons, but now on to our review. Woohoo! Here we are with Albert Nothlit to continue our review of Sense8, episodes 7, 8, 9?
Right, yeah.
Yes.
So, any forethought before we dive into the individual episodes?
I just want one thing to say to start off with. Last episode, we had the little side discussion of whether I thought Vance was wrong and I was right, and that wasn't my intent at all, so I want to clear the air. What I failed to remember, and my husband reminded me after I had an offline conversation with Vance, online because we're not in the same state, but offline from the show, is that my husband reminded me that one of the reasons why I ended up writing Beware Mohawks Bearing Gifts was because of a flaw that I saw in Sense8. And that is based in the science that they actually used. And this is something that Vance pointed out in last week's discussion, and I want to kind of bring it forward. So the thing that I want to bring up is that there is a reference in, I believe it was episode 6, you said, Vance?
6 or 7.
Episode 6? Oh. Where there is a sequence in a forest, and there is a conversation that's had about this phrase mycelium, which is the mycelial network, but it's a psychic kind of thing. And the whole reason why, and I totally forgot this because in between when I saw it originally, when it came out in 2015, and where we are today, I had a big bout of cancer and I had a lot of chemo that went through, and I had totally forgotten this aspect of why I did what I did prior to my becoming ill. And it boils down to the fact that when I watched Sense8, it kind of gave me ideas of what I could do with my own story that I had been working on in the background for 10 to 15 years. And I thought, oh, I could use this. I could use this kind of idea and run with it. And the reason why I didn't is because the science isn't there in the science fiction to support what the Wachowskis and J. Michael Straczynski are. Is that how you say his last name? I can't remember now. J. Michael Straczynski.
Okay.
What they put out was that it was part of this mycelial kind of thing, but on a psychic level. The problem with mycelial is you have to have a medium, which is the fungus, which is the particles and that stuff, in order for it to work. It is actually better based if it goes to quantum mechanics and actually uses entanglement, because entanglement is the only thing that can allow for instantaneous, regardless of distance. Because even when you apply mycelial science to that kind of interpretation, and you look at Star Trek Discovery, where they've used it, it is a process to travel the network. It's not an instantaneous thing. Not in the sense that it is with, like they use it in Sense8. And this was the whole reason why my husband, who is a quantum mechanics physicist, talked me out of using it, because it was a fundamental flaw in the science being applied to the Sense8 story. That entanglement is better applied because of two factors. One, we don't really know what the fuck it is. That's the major thing. And it happens so spooky in ways that are completely unexplainable, that modern science, well, it was coined by Albert Einstein as being spooky science from a distance. That's how he termed it. And it actually pushed against, it was the argument Neil Bohr's had with Albert Einstein over his relativity kind of outlook and his position. And Bohr had this moment where he realized, wait a minute. And with quantum mechanics becoming a thing as it started to bloom at that time, Bohr proposed this whole quantum entanglement, where something can happen regardless of distance. It can happen at the exact same time, and both are affected at the exact same points in their respective places, and it happens instantaneously with no peering communication between them. So therefore the spooky science. And this was the whole reason why my husband argued against me using what Sense8 used and go for entanglement, because entanglement truly is spooky. It has that supernatural feel. So to Vance's point, I'd like to say it really was a really valid point when he pushed it and said, this is one of the things that a lot of people have used. And he's right. There are other shows that have used this concept, but there is a fundamental flaw in how a lot of people are applying it from a science standpoint. So I just wanted to put that out there to kind of clear the air. One of the things I think beyond the science of this show is it's actually more of a catalyst in the medium for these very desperate characters to find the common thread. And that's the strength of the show. So with all of that in mind, Albert, what did you think of episodes 7, 8, and 9?
Yeah, well, I enjoyed these episodes. And actually, to your point, I think it's important to point out that sometimes in science fiction, you have to suspend disbelief a little bit just to get to the good stuff, because it's obvious
Doctor
that
Who does it all the time.
I mean, yeah, exactly. So here, I mean, we have 8 people who are sharing information and experience. That's obviously not possible. I mean, but it just isn't. But the cool part about science fiction is if you say, for example, well, if this is true, then what? And that's the cool part, because then you get to explore humanity through a different lens. And that shows you, like what we were discussing, like we are the same and like we are maybe different, but there are things that connect us, etc. So that's very nice. And you can see that as the show progresses. Like you get to learn more about the characters, specifically here with, well, I mean, my favorite episode was episode 9. We'll get to that, I suppose. But in episode 7, you kind of start seeing other things. For example, I really liked the scene when Sun goes to prison and she's with other inmates and they tell her that in South Korea, sometimes you can only find brave women in prison. I loved that line. I thought it was really cool.
Or freedom. Mm-hmm. They could find freedom in prison.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
Dance?
So these are the episodes where all the characters' lives are falling apart. I mean, this is the part of the story where every single life has some sort of crumble. So,
but they find strength in each other.
They find strength in each other, and they're slowly finding their way through it. But at the same time, as a viewer, you're watching 8 lives being torn apart. I mean, Nomi is hunted. Amanita's mom is almost arrested by pseudo scientists. Felix, spoiler alert, Felix gets shot and is dead. Will loses his job, or he's at least suspended. Dead. Felix, the Wolfgang.
Felix doesn't die. I think.
You're
just
right.
like very badly hurt.
He's in the hospital bed throughout these episodes. You're right. He's in the hospital bed. I apologize. Still, he gets shot.
It's shocking when it happens.
And so, like I said, it's shocking when it happens. Kala's father-in-law is stabbed on the steps of her temple. Like I said, you're watching each of these lives get torn apart in some way, and that's after a while. After 3, compacted into 3 episodes. That's a lot. That's a lot of drama.
You're right, Vance. I have been noticing that because there are so many characters and each of them is struggling with something, as a viewer, you get like all of this condensed and it can get like difficult to watch sometimes, like so many things. And I think the only character with whom I'm really not connecting very much, and I don't know if I'm the only one, is Wolfgang. I'm like, okay, yeah, he's a criminal. And like his crisis is of his own making. Maybe that's why I'm not connecting with him.
All I'll say about Wolfgang is that his relevance and the reason why I think that he has a growth in this whole thing is because of Kala. Kala, it begins to give him some grounding that he's desperately in need of. And I think that for him, he has all the action part of it like Sun, but Sun has her own demons to work with. And whereas Kala, she's much more even keeled. She's much more reserved. She's almost literally the opposite of what Wolfgang is. And I think that for him, and I understand why you're not connecting with him, but it does, I don't want to say it gets better, but his value increases the longer he's involved.
My take on Wolfgang is kind of interesting. He's by far the most stoic of the group, like the most in control, or at least aware of his emotions. Therefore, they don't affect him as hard. But if you think back to episode 6, the orgy scene, his were the only genitalia we saw, and he was not excited by the orgy. He was in a hot tub, and he was not excited by it. He just kind of was observing it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he's probably the most European in that way.
Well, yeah.
From that side of it. But I think it's also he's also the most neutral, even across the sexuality spectrum,
Mhm.
because
And the
I
emotion
don't
spectrum.
think, yeah, no, exactly.
All right. Specific episodes, if you have thoughts. Starting with episode 7, what would Nancy Drew do?
I love that title. That's so cool.
Yes, when Nomi and Amanita go into detective mode.
Yeah.
That was super fun, and them getting all the hacking stuff and everything. I was like,
Mhm.
I mean, they're actually starting to fight back, which is really brave of them.
You're
It's
right.
like, well, I mean, we're being hunted by this shadowy organization so powerful. Let's do something about it. So I love that. Yeah,
And I like Bug.
yeah, I know. Yeah,
I had a difficult time with him because he kept hitting the border of dead naming Nomi.
Yes, he
Like
walks.
he was just inconsiderate about the whole situation, and then he went the wrong direction with the sexuality part of it. And I'm like,
oh,
nope,
yeah.
nope, nope. I don't know.
It's a flaw of Bugs, but he's also extremely cool, and he plays a bigger role down the road, and he grows with the whole thing. Yeah, but he's just one of these Californian dudes who he rolls with the punches, doesn't always say the right thing that comes out of his mouth, but his heart's in the right place. He's one of the good guys. Um,
Oh,
what I want to comment about with 7, 8, and 9 is that you begin to get the concept of other clusters, and
Mm-hmm.
this is a big factor. It's a much bigger factor than they're leaning into in the beginning, and this is really where the meat and potatoes of the show is. And can I just say, the other thing that I want to comment on 7, 8, and 9, I forgot how incredibly emotionally heartbreaking Riley's story is, all on its own.
yeah.
Her previous history and what she goes through, and we get in the last 3 episodes of this season, you really get her full story, and it is emotionally heartbreaking, and you begin to find what her path is going to be in this whole thing, and how pivotal will play in it. So it's something that I forgot about completely. And actually, I'm kind of surprised at how much I forgot until I watched it again. But yeah, Riley's story was probably one of the most touching out of the entire series that I really started to feel for her character. And I love the actress who plays her. I just love her.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like these episodes begin to show us maybe things that we can wonder about as viewers. For example, at the end of 7 is when Whispers takes over this other person. And then I began to think, well, wait, so maybe are there like particularly gifted sensates who can overpower other people and maybe take over completely? Or is it just with people who've had this horrible operation? That's maybe an interesting avenue to explore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Baz is like, haha, I'm not going to answer, haha.
Well, it's the thing that for me, it's not only that Whispers has many levels. I'll just leave it there. And this revisiting thing about Jonas and Angelica maybe not being who you think they are.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I will say the Wachowskis did very well is this is a cloud that becomes increasingly hard to hug and figure out, because every time you pull a layer back and you think you understand Jonas and Angelica, something comes your way that kind of subverts that. And so you get a lot of this push me, pull you kind of thing with it. And I think in a way, I kind of like it, because it gives you an element as a viewer to struggle with in trying to figure out, are my characters safe? Is my cluster safe? Because as the story progresses, you begin to feel more as a part of the cluster, because you're able to see these connections being made. That I think that when you get the evidence of these other rival clusters and you begin to see how it all plays out, it becomes very, very personal to the cluster that we've been with this whole time. One other thing I do want to mention, just briefly, Nando and Lito's breakup and Lito not having the wherewithal. And I love the juxtaposition of him playing this big macho hero, and yet in real life, he can't stand up for himself, or
Mm-hmm.
Nando and his relationship, or Daniela, and he has to really find his grounding. And I think it's amazing that Nando, who obviously loves Lito very much, says, I can't be with you while you figure this out. And he risks the fact that he'll lose Lito, but I think Nando knows that Lito's not going to give this up. He knows it's not something that Lito's willing to put down and just say, oh, well, it is what it is. So I do like that part of their journey, is Nando forcing Lito to look at himself in the mirror and be okay with himself.
What I appreciated was the actual phrase he used. It was the, I don't know what you need, but I know what I need.
Oh, that was good. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That actual phrase was very powerful.
Yeah. I didn't understand why.
I like the care that they
Mm-hmm.
take. Oh, no, I just want to say, I like the care that they take. Well, the Wachowskis obviously were going through their own transition at the time, but I like the care that they take with the queer characters, that they have these nuances. So sorry, go ahead, Albert.
No, I was just going to say, I didn't understand why Hernando chose to break up with Lito at the set. Like, he barely gave him any chance to speak. Like, Lito was very worried that someone might overhear. I don't know. I didn't understand his motivation for that. It seemed overly dramatic. Like, I would do that in a private place, maybe.
I think he didn't want a long, drawn-out scene. I think he wanted to say his piece and walk away, and he knew that that was the place where Lito would not have a big reaction.
Oh.
Because there were witnesses.
Right. Cool.
It also gave Lito the opportunity to turn around to the camera crew and say, you know what, this is my partner. And he didn't do that. That could have saved the relationship right there.
Yep.
No, I think Nando's choice was very deliberate and on purpose.
And loving.
Oh, yeah.
The one other thing I want to add, I just suddenly thought of it, and it's actually one of my what are we on about that we'll do in the next segment. There's a guy by the name of, I can't remember his first name now, but I'll put the link down in the show notes. And his YouTube channel is Emergency, but it's IMURGENCIE, I think. And he did this whole take on people of color casting, and how when Black people are cast, or when Latinos are cast, or when you have people of color cast, it tends to be the lighter shades of those races that are cast. And he gives several examples of this. And when you have darker shades of people being cast, they're often played down as the villain or the problems maker, or what have you, the antagonist. And he had a real conversation about his position. He's also a queer person of color. So he was having this discussion about that, and he was citing some things. And I suddenly noticed that in watching Sense8, they really bucked that whole thing with casting, because you have the obvious position. They filmed in Nairobi. They obviously cast Nairobi people as extras, and so you have the spectrum of color and stuff. And so it's a cult driven show, so it's not like there isn't an audience for this stuff. And what this guy ended up laying at the feet of shows like Wednesday, who cast the Black girl as the villainous sort of character. His whole point was, we need to break some of that, so that the spectrum of color within people of color is also represented equally, and also gets the best chance to play the roles, not just the bad guy who's going to shoot everybody or whatever, that we get to play all those kinds of characters. And he lays it at the feet of the casting directors. And that's something that I have to applaud the crew of Sense8 for, because you get all of that. You get all the spectrum. You get when you see Kafius in South Korea walking amongst them. You see Sun in Nairobi walking amongst them. You see Daryl Hannah, So one of the things I think the Wachowskis did very well was rooted this show in how life really is as far as human beings, So I just want to give them props for that, because obviously it's still something as a industry that doesn't often get done. And it's nice to see when people get it right without even being told. And so I kind of want to give the cast and the crew of Sense8 props for truly seeing people as people. They did a very good job of that in this show.
Yeah. That adds to the strength of the show as well. I mean, you really do get to see these little windows into parts of the world you may never go, you might have never visited. And I think it makes the show more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And also it kind of makes me want to go.
I mean, not going to lie, Reykjavik's been on my to-go list for a while now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that cave itself. I just want to go to that cave.
It's really beautiful, yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that'll do it for this week, unless anybody has anything else to contribute.
I just want to mention the standout scene for me was in episode 9, which was Lito and Nomi's conversation. Well, it was incredible. I really
in the museum.
It. In the museum, yeah.
Yeah, that was astounding.
It was wonderful. It was very emotional.
For both characters. Mm-hmm.
Yes. It was awesome.
Agreed. I'm looking forward to seeing how this wraps up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For season 1. All right, everybody. I guess that's it. Thanks again, Albert, for stepping in for this segment. We have one more to go to finish out season 1.
And then, viewers, listeners, if you enjoy science fiction stories, check out albertnothlit.com. He's got several for you to choose from. They're all amazing.
Absolutely. And Albert and I will be continuing with season 2 and the final wrap-up movie as reaction videos. We're going to be filming them in the month of February. Hopefully I'll be able to get them out depending on how copyright plays. I guess this is like the big thing in trying to release these into YouTube. Mm-hmm. But our Patreon will have the full versions unedited. They will just be Albert's and my reactions in the moment as we're watching it. So, if you want to be a part of that, so we highly recommend you subscribe and become a Patreon with our Patreon, which is patreon.com/RopePodcast, and help us keep the lights on, and we'll give you some extra content on for all of your assistance. So just want to put that out there as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. On to what are we on about?
Woohoo! And we cut there.
All right. Oh, looking forward to the last episodes. Let's see.
And then, Albert, I'll send you an email so we can figure out timing-wise how we want to schedule the season 2 and then the final movie kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
And just let me know when those videos are ready, and I will push them to Patreon.
Okay.
All right. Well, guys, thanks.
All right. So, what are you on about, or who won your week?
So bit of health news. I was diagnosed pre-diabetic, so started the ketogenic diet 4 days ago. I'm suddenly not excited about food, and I do not want to be one of those people in the restaurants like, I'm on the keto diet. Nope. So I have to figure out a way to politely ask for it. Can I just have grilled chicken and broccoli? Everywhere I go.
Yeah.
Aside from that, Mayfair, which has started up. Yeah, I know. Mayfair, which has started up, and while not as queer as her vampires by far, so far episode 1 was engaging and interesting and followed the book pretty well, with a recast of a character as a black character, which I thought was beautifully done, because he's highly intelligent and he's the investigator into what's going on between Deirdre and Rowan. So I'm hoping to see
casting. It matters.
100%. 100%. And this story takes place in New Orleans.
Yeah, come on, people.
Modern day New Orleans, no less.
Right.
Um,
Well,
I think
go
in the
ahead.
book, Deirdre's nurse was written as black, and they kept that.
Okay. I think you're
So
right.
there,
I think, yeah, if I remember right. Yeah, I think you have it
but
right.
the investigator, he may not have been described, so that may have been my own prejudice in the book making him white, but he's not in the show, and I'm very glad for it.
I haven't started watching it yet, so I'm kind of looking forward to it.
The actress who plays Rowan, it took me a while to figure out who she was without cheating. She was the girl who played Athena's daughter in the first Percy Jackson. It
So
took me a
she's
minute to
actually in both.
figure. Was she in both? I don't remember her the second one
Yeah,
that
she's
well
in
at
both.
all because it was not as exciting.
Yeah, it wasn't done very well.
But I definitely recalled her from the first one. It just took a minute. So I'm
Yep.
curious to see where that series goes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I've heard it's a slow burn until
Mhm.
you get to like episode 4 or 5, and then things start to really take off. That's what I've heard, the rumor mill that I've seen, and people who are doing the show as
Yeah.
reactions. It's
Okay.
kind of when you
Well,
get to episode 4 or 5, some
how
of them have said that's when it turns. So,
how are they watching 4? 2 only came out last night.
well, I think some of them have like they're on the press corps kind of thing, and so they
Oh,
get things ahead of time.
gotcha.
So,
Gotcha. All right, then, Miss
okay.
Moneypenny. Continue on.
So here are the things I'm on about. I've already given you one with this emergency guy who did this color class kind of casting. So I'm going to put the link down below. So we've already got that one out of the way. But Theo James, who was in White Lotus, he was also in the Divergent series. He was the Turkish prince in Downton Abbey.
Okay.
So there evidently is a biopic that's in the making of George Michael, and Theo James has expressed interest if there is such a thing. And I love the quote that he used in his tweet. He said, would love to play George, who's an icon, and he's a little bit Greek, and I'm a little bit Greek, and you put that Greek together and we get a falafel. I thought it was cute. I'm here for it. If he wants to play it and people think he'll be good at it, I'm good. I'm down with it. So, and there's supposedly supposed to be a warts and all kind of George Michael story, not like just the polished stuff. So, we'll see. The second thing, it's also historical and deals with queer life. Back in the day, King James I had a gay lover. It was George Buckingham. And there's a new TV series coming out by Sky Network in Britain, and it's called Mary and George, and Julianne Moore plays the mother to George Buckingham. And George Buckingham is the character in historical reference who actually was King James' last and what was termed to be his greatest love. And Nicholas Galintzine is playing the George Buckingham character. He is in the movie Handsome Devil, for those who have seen that film. He was the one who played the rugby gay boy in that one. So he's going to be playing George Buckingham, and I'm kind of looking forward to that. So those are the two things that I'm on about. Did you have a Who Won Your Week?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's have it.
I'm going to do mine second this time.
Oh, okay. Well, Who Won My Week this week is actually kind of something that's always in the back of my mind. I'm always keeping tabs on, and Jay, my husband, gave me a heads up about it. Evidently, the whole thing that natives push back on, and there is some scientific data to support their claim, that the Great Bering Strait crossing that a lot of genealogists tend to push, and people who are doing the DNA stuff, natives have historically pushed against that. There's a lot of them saying that we were always here. What is come out recently in some research that has been done is that the crossings of the Great Bearing were far more complicated than original archaeologists and historians and sociologists and anthropologists have led us to believe. There is actually proof of Native American blood being found in Japanese people. So the crossings weren't a one-way ticket. And as my husband says, if they were, they'd have to be one hell of a fast runner to make it over that short amount of time. They'd have to be marathon runners, all of them. So, and there's enough evidence to support, because there are artifacts of tribal peoples down in the southern parts of South America that are not in line or of a nature that is anywhere near African representation. So, and that predate the Bering crossing. So it's a much more complicated picture across the board. And so I kind of like seeing that people are still pursuing this and trying to look at what really happened, because I think the Americas are often written off as being New World a little too much, when there is ample evidence that we already have some things that predate the Bering Strait crossing. And we also have things that are questionable of whether or not the science of how sociologists, anthropologists, and the rest have said all happened, as if the decision and the discussion is over. We're finding out through DNA and other things that it's not necessarily what we've all been led to believe. So keep that channel open. More to come, I'm sure, but they won my week because I like seeing that the world is far more complex than people like to put it in a box and call it. So life is messy. Life is just messy.
Yes, it is.
There you are, people. Okay, yours?
50 years ago, the Endangered Species Act was signed into, I don't want to say law, but signed into action anyway. And there was a retrospective done where they looked at the data, and they've shown that it was primarily responsible, though not 100%, but primarily responsible for saving the American alligator, the gray wolf, the bald eagle, which came off the endangered list in 2007, peregrine falcons, and humpback whales, which came off the list 10 years ago. So kudos to the Endangered Species Act for saving these and other. I mean, the list of species saved numbers in the thousand. Single thousand, not 2000s, but still. That's significant and important, and I'm glad it's still on the books and still being pursued.
Yeah. Let's just hope the Republicans in the House are preoccupied with their social wars that they don't get to touch the shit. It's not going to go anywhere because you've got the Senate on the Dem side. So shit ain't going to go anywhere. It's all performative, but still.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Yeah. Oh, there was one other thing I saw that I thought was rather interesting. This was just a minor blip in one rando economics-based video I saw on YouTube. Evidently, remember this big old scare at the end of, towards the middle and end of last year, of these looters who would run in and rob stores and just brazenly, and then run out and get in a car and drive away and all this stuff. And they made a big thing in all the news stations. Everybody was covering it. Well, it turns out that stores might have hyped that up because Walgreens and Walmart and several of them came forward and said, yeah, turns out our losses were no greater than 2%. So it was all hyperbole. It was all drama for clickbait and watches on TV. So that's another thing, people bear in mind when you watch this stuff and this news and they start hyping something as a major thing. Just realize they're in it for the watch hours, they're in it for the ratings, they're in it for the click-throughs. So, take whatever you get with a grain of salt, because 9 times out of 10, it's just there to sell airtime. So
I know a fairly high-placed executive in one of the larger retail chains who specifically said that they refuse to start paying people over a certain dollar amount. They would rather drive the store into the ground than pay pay a competitive salary. So keep in mind that stories like that are also pity plays to try to get employees to come in and work for less.
Yeah. Which is a robbery of a different kind.
It is.
Robber barons haven't left. They've just gone into a new business.
They've legitimized themselves. All right, folks. Written on the Edge is produced by Rote Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, link to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. If you enjoy learning about new artists, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Please follow our guests today. They're both amazing. We have all the links below. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Bye-bye.
What's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.